Good evening, everyone. My name is Crystal Ellington. I am the Communications Director here at Minority Veterans of America, and welcome to Our Stories Are Truth When the Uniform Comes Off. So this evening is dedicated to recounting and reflecting upon the history of discrimination against racial and ethnic minorities within the military and after their service. Tonight will be a night of storytelling, space sharing, and ultimately of celebration of the resilience and strength of our minority siblings in arms. Angelo Quinto, George Gonzalez, Gwillia Dale, and Luther Jackson, who our show is dedicated to this evening. These names, among countless others, are the names of veterans of color who have been murdered by the police. Racial and ethnic minorities have been on the front lines of nearly every war in this country, yet we face systemic and sometimes blatant discrimination from the comrades and the country we're supposed to protect. In a military that grows increasingly more racially diverse by the year, instances of racially motivated harassment and violence are common. Based on 2019 survey data from the Military Times, about 36% of respondents had seen evidence of white supremacist and racial ideologies in the military, a rise of 14% in just 1 year. When service members get out, they face an American public that has been historically marginalized, oppressed, and terrorizing to racial minority communities. Tonight, we're going to break this topic wide open. We recognize that tonight might bring up intense feelings or emotions, as topics discussed will be sensitive in nature. We encourage all those present to take a pause if necessary, take a break, and to care for yourselves. This session will be available on demand starting tomorrow if you need to take a break and return. We'd also like to thank the Black Veterans Project and PBS for teaming up with minority vets to bring you tonight's session. Following the last speaker, we will share a clip originally aired during PBS's series American Veteran, which features an interview with two African-American military units, the 688 and the Tuskegee Airmen. At this time, we'd like to take a moment of silence for our racial and ethnic minority siblings in arms that we have lost both in service to our country and those we've lost to instances of racially motivated violence. Thank you so much for that moment of silence. So I'd like to open up our evening with my own personal story. Growing up Black in the South, racism wasn't something that was completely new to me. I was raised among the most incendiary of racists, folks that proudly brandished their Confederate flags, cowboy boots, and mullets, and always had I have friends that are Black in their arsenal. However, I made it through most of my life unscathed by racist and discriminatory culture, aside from the occasional comment that I was well-spoken or sassy. Later in life, I had a friend tell me all the wonderful things about joining the military. You get great benefits, you could go to school for free, and you have guaranteed job security. However, as my personality values people over things, I was most drawn to the idea of being in a place where race, religion, or ethnicity didn't matter. I was enamored with the idea of entering into a space that was diverse, where all of my comrades in arms were family and everybody had each other's six. However, I quickly realized that wasn't actually how stuff worked. Upon going to my military career specific training called Advanced Individual Training in the Army Branch, I looked around and saw a handful of people of color, and I was one of two Black women. The sad truth was, and in many ways still is, that certain career specialties don't attract or retain people of color or women. Unfortunately, aviation, which is where I was, is one of those fields, but that didn't deter me. To add insult to injury, I decided to go into the special operations branch of aviation. I had absolutely no idea what I was getting myself into, but I really wanted to push the boundaries of my comfort zone. In short, I really wanted to be a badass. I remember having only two minority superiors in AIT, and both were men. One day, one of them called me into the office and asked me, was I seriously thinking of joining special ops? And I said yes. He began to tell me that I wouldn't make it, that this particular unit was draining on your family life, your body, and that they'd alienate me because I was a Black woman. I brushed it off, thinking he was just being a hater. My mind was already made up. So then, after AIT and training for my special ops unit, I flew out to Fort Lewis, about 40 miles south of Seattle, Washington. I showed up at my unit eager and ready to work, prepared to join my comrades in the fight. I slowly began to see that not only was I the first and only Black helicopter female in my unit, but I was regarded as less than solely for that reason. I witnessed being passed over for a promotion despite being overly qualified. I was also frequently asked probing questions about my hair and was even referred to as a little Black girl from a certain superior when he was looking for me. Men that were supposedly my teammates even would show me memes with racially charged language and really expected me to laugh. One day I had had enough. I decided to file an equal opportunity complaint against several individuals and finally hoped that I would receive some semblance of justice. However, as just about anyone who has filed an EO complaint can probably attest to, the reporting and investigation system is flawed at best. So once I filed my complaint, my unit quickly assigned an investigating officer, awesome, who just so happens to sit across the hall from my commander. Not so awesome. When given the opportunity to share my story with him, he began to actually defend the perpetrators, attesting that, well, maybe they didn't mean to offend you. He ended his speech with a few quips about how he had a mixed race niece and how certain racist comments shouldn't have offended me because if I read my history, Black people owned slaves too. Now, in conclusion, I'd be remiss and wrong if I said that the military is a racist and discriminatory place as a whole. I met amazing people within the military and my unit that have forever changed my life for the better. However, just like anywhere else in this country, there are racist and problematic and discriminatory individuals. While this is not a new phenomenon, the policies and regulations surrounding accountability for these individuals must be changed if we are to have a more inclusive armed forces. Thank you so much for listening to my story tonight, and we're going to go ahead and move right along in the program. So our first speaker this evening is Dr. Ann James. So she's originally from Georgia. She began her career as an enlisted member in the U.S. Air Force. Over her military career, she held numerous job positions, which included personnel administration, financial management, and was selected to serve as a Reserve Officer Training Corps instructor, which prepares young men and women to become commissioned officers in the Air Force. While serving as a financial officer, she was responsible for executing multi-million-dollar operating budgets within the US and overseas. After 21 years of proud service, she retired as a commissioned officer. In her continuance of service, now as the founder and CEO of Financial Freedom Battle Buddies, Dr. Ann is on a mission to educate and equip military personnel and veterans to properly manage and take care of their personal finances so that they can live freely. Additionally, Dr. Ann hosts the Freedom Battle Buddies of Color podcast that highlights the experience and expertise of women of color that have served or are serving in the military. Everyone, I'm proud to announce Dr. Ann James. Hey, Dr. Ann.
Hey, Crystal, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Can you
All
hear me
right. So
okay?
what do you have to share with us this evening?
Yeah, well, first for starters, thank you for the invite to participate here tonight. I just think that is a much needed conversation that definitely needs to be had. So thank you for inviting me to this platform. Yeah, as you mentioned, our backgrounds are very similar. I grew up in the South in Georgia, but, around my teenage years, I moved to California. So it was very racially diverse, right? You see people from all walks of life. So race was really never a concern to me until, like you said, when I too joined the military and we hear all the benefits and following the footsteps of my brother. But my very first duty station, girl, was Ellsworth, South Dakota. I was Air Force, by the way. So, and I'm like, what, South Dakota? Where is South Dakota? Right? I didn't even know where South Dakota was on the map, type of thing. So needless to say, going from California to South Dakota was definitely a shock, to say the least. There wasn't very many of us, in those cold weather environments. I didn't know how to walk on the snow, drive in the snow, anything like that. But once again, I made the most of it. As you alluded to when reading my bio, I went in and enlisted, but it was about at the 12-year mark, and I'm fast forwarding here a bit, about the 12-year mark is that I decided to, if I'm going to stay in this thing for a career, I might as well make the most out of it. So that's why I earned my commission from the University of Southern Mississippi. So I would say, I think at the time I was a first lieutenant, but I always say, I wasn't your average lieutenant, because of my prior military enlisted time. I think enlisted personnel makes the best officers. So I made that known. But the first time I would really have to say that I felt some type of discrimination due to, my race. It's one thing to be a woman in the military, right? But when you put that race on top of that, that double-edged sword on top of that, that is something totally different. And especially as an officer, I would have never thought that, that would be the case. But I remember this one individual, I think he was a major or lieutenant colonel at the time. He asked me, and this is when early 2000s, so I'm dating myself, and I had just went natural with my hair. So at the time I wore, like you, that hair thing, right? I had twists in my hair. And this guy said to me, "What are those thingies in your hair?" And I'm like, who he talking? What? Thingies, So needless to say, I had to turn that into a Black History education moment, and it was not the month of February, okay? So it was a matter of educating that individual that I do not wear thingies in my hair. This is what is called, that type stuff. So I'm really happy to see that, like you said, the policies have changed, that twists, dreads, all of that is now more accepted in the military, but we still have to deal with things when it comes to our hair. So that was really my concern at the time. And I'm just fortunate once again to have a platform, as you mentioned now, with my podcast, Freedom Battle Buddies of Color, to bring on women that are currently serving or have served, to let them talk about their experiences, as a woman of color. Whether you're mill to military, mill to mill, or you're a single parent, or you're already transitioned out after 20 years or whatever have you, to provide that safe space to share our experiences so that our voices are heard too. And I like to say, we serve too. So once again, just thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your story, Dr. Ann. I did have a question for you. So you did mention that you are the CEO of Financial Freedom Battle Buddies. Do you think that the fact that mostly women and women of color having, financial issues after they leave the military and don't really have the financial wherewithal to transition properly, do you think that had a hand in having you start the organization?
Oh, absolutely. That organization started off my personal experiences, you know what I mean? At the time when I was in the military, I'm a single parent. My daughters had special needs. So when I transitioned out, I just wanted to make sure that, my daughter never wanted for anything in her life. And, and a lot of times in the African American or minority community in general, we don't talk about money. It's like taboo. It's not talked about at home. It's rarely talked about in schools nowadays. So, and I do believe that the military, they're getting better at it, but they prepare us more to join the military, right? Or to become a part of the team versus preparing us to transition out. And especially in regards to our finances. Yeah, they talk about resumes and how to dress and how to do interviews. But what about if you don't have that retirement check, like myself, to fall back on, that type stuff. And even if you do have that retirement check, if you don't know how to manage it well, it doesn't matter. So absolutely, Financial Freedom Battle Buddies was born based off of my own personal experience. And like the term says, that battle buddy, that's someone to have you to go through this journey. Financial freedom to me is a journey, it's not a destination. So to have someone to go with you that knows what you've been through, and to be like, hey, if I can do it as a single parent of a special needs child, then you can do it as well.
Awesome. Well, I can attest that I recently separated this year in July, and the process for out processing and having finance talks has not gotten any better. So
Okay.
we definitely are in need of your services. So Dr. Ann, tell us how we can get in touch with you.
Yes, the best way is to go on my website is www.drannjames.com. You'll find out all about the services that I offer. You can get on my email list to get money tips. And also that's where you'll find out about the podcast. I open, Crystal, I'm waiting on you to get you on there as well to I just want to share our experiences as women of color that we serve too. There's so many podcasts that's out there that's geared towards women veterans in general. And I know because I've been on probably all of them, but I hadn't seen anything out there that for us, by us. So I'm hoping to fill that void. So if anyone's interested in sharing their story, no matter what it is on the podcast, please feel free to reach out. I'm also on LinkedIn, Dr. Ann James. Instagram, same thing, Dr. Ann James, or Facebook is just Ann James. They had me drop the doctor. I don't know why, but I still earned it. But, but
Yes,
that's
you
the
did.
best way to reach me is via my website, drannjames.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time this evening, Dr. Ann, and we will surely be talking more soon.
Yes, we will. Thank you, Crystal.
Thank you. All right, moving right along in our program here. Our next speaker is going to be Isaiah James. So he's a Jamaican American community organizer and Army veteran who served 2 tours in Iraq, me too, and 1 in Afghanistan during his 8 years of service. Isaiah serves as the senior policy advisor for the Black Veterans Project, in addition to sitting on the Brain Trust. Isaiah ran for Congress of Central Brooklyn's 9th Congressional District in 2018. He is a graduate of Brooklyn College with a degree in political science. He's also pursuing his master's in public administration at Baruch College in New York City. Everyone, please welcome Isaiah James.
What up, what up, what up? Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me, Crystal and Minority Vets, for agreeing to bring me on. I don't know why anybody wants to listen to me or hear my story, but I'm glad when people do want to listen to me and hear my story. So I guess I'll tell you my story. I'm one of 21 kids. So yeah, I see your eyes. You just sound Jamaican. So my parents are old school Jamaican. So yes, I'm one of 21 kids. And believe it or not, my dad, who is still not a citizen to this day, he served in the Army. He served in Vietnam when he came over here in the late 60s. I didn't know my dad served in the Army until I was 18 years old, getting ready to go into the Army, because he never talked about it. Not once in our life did I ever know my father served in the military before I signed up. But we grew up super poor. I grew up with both my parents. We grew up super poor. And it's not because for lack of trying. My parents worked their tails off. I'll keep it PG. They worked their tails off, but we still didn't have the money to afford anything. So, you know, I looked at the Army for me, not as a step up, but as a way out, because there was nothing, absolutely nothing. I have friends right now to this day who are doing life in prison because the same dudes I went to school with in elementary and middle school and high school, because there were no opportunities. So, you know, the recruiters, they're hanging around the high schools, and they'll get you with the, hey, free college, you can travel the world. You know what I mean? And I was a bit of a, in my social cocoon. So they're like, hey, you know, you wear a uniform, girls will love you, you be in the Army. I was like, all right, whatever. I ain't got nothing else to do. So I joined the military. And keep in mind now, I'm a big dude. I sound like this, but I'm actually a nerd. I'm pretty smart. So when I took the ASVAB and the GT test, ASVAB and whatever it was, I got high enough to do anything in the military. They wanted me to be a cryptologist, believe it or not. But, you know, I was in ROTC in high school, and my instructor was an infantry Marine. My uncle was in Panama. He was an infantry soldier. My dad was in the Army. He was an infantry soldier. So the only thing I knew about the military was infantry. So I picked infantry. I didn't even know what infantry was. I thought it was like Call of Duty, like video games, you know. It ain't like that, trust me. So I picked infantry, and I went through basic training at Fort Benning, you know, did all that stuff. Blase, blase. 4.5 months later, I get orders to go to airborne school. I say, you know what, I'm going to airborne school. I had a crazy change of fate. I went to the hospital one day on base for some checkup or something for airborne school. I met this other black dude. There's not many black guys in the infantry. So when I met this other black dude, we got to rapping, and he had a full leg cast on. I was like, yo, what happened to you? He's like, man, I broke my femur in airborne school. So I was like, oh, well, I went to my instructor. I was like, I voluntarily withdraw from airborne school. And they said, James, if you withdraw from airborne school, you're going to be needs of the Army. You're going to send you wherever they need you. I was like, fine, I'll go wherever, as long as I don't gotta go to Texas, because for some reason I didn't like Texas. I got orders to Texas. So 30 days after basic training, I was in Iraq. Just put it like that. I didn't get any leave. I didn't get to see my family. Yep, I got to Fort Hood, Texas, and I left for Iraq 30 days later. So the training that I got in basic training was all I got before I went to war. And that was a 15-month deployment because we got extended while we were over there. So it was supposed to be 12 months. I remember calling my sister, and the night I was leaving, I was like, yo, tell Ma I'm going to Iraq. If I don't make it back, y'all got all the stuff. It's coming to y'all. She's like, all right. I was like, all right. And that was it. That was my first deployment. So, talking about racism and racial disparities in the military, they're everywhere. First of all, the military is a microcosm of society. So for us to be naive to think that there's no racism in the military would be just naive. There's racism everywhere. Like I said, I was the only Black guy in my unit for the most part, because for the most part, African Americans were subjugated and relegated to service roles in the military. So you go with what you know. All you know is my uncle was a mechanic, my mom was a cook, my friend, was a supply clerk. So those are the jobs you pick. Infantry has a high career advancement because we have such a high turnover rate because people die and get wounded all the time. So I picked infantry. I did in the first deployment. We got back after 15 months, and the racism was still there. I got in trouble for stuff that I didn't even do. I got in trouble for stuff for trying to help. I didn't even do anything, and I got field grade Article 15s. I remember the first day in basic training, we got off the cattle trucks, and I'm 6'8". So I'm 6'8", and I'm standing there. I had a drill sergeant that was 5'5", a little white guy. Can't remember his name, but I'll never forget. He had a 101st Combat Patch. He had a really big nose. And he told me every time I talked to him, I had to get on my knees and go to parade rest because he didn't want me towering over him. I swear to you. So every time I talked to this dude for 18 weeks, I had to get on my knees and go to parade rest because he didn't want me standing over him. I'll never forget my senior drill sergeant. They would always, call me the N-word. They were like, and my drill sergeant was a big, big dude. He was Greek. Drill Sergeant Vasilopoulos. He had a weird last name. That's all I'll never forget him. They should just call me the N-word like it was nothing. But when you're in the infantry, who are you gonna complain to? There's no way to complain. They would always say they're toughening you up. They're toughening you up, you know what I mean? But they would pick on me because I was the big guy and the Black guy. So I would get it from all angles, but I just figured that was the way of the military, and then as I got older and higher in rank in the military, then I would see some of my counterparts, because then, when you're young in the military, somebody's in charge of you. When you're older in the military, you're in charge of other people. So when I got to be a squad leader and I had to be in charge of 5 other young men's lives, we'd have our squad leader meetings, and I would hear the other things that the folks in charge were saying. I was like, well, bro, you can't say that. Or you can't think that just because this kid comes from a certain place or a certain area. But again, the military is a microcosm of society. Just because you wear a uniform does not automatically erase your biases or prejudice, and they are still there. And so that was my first deployment. Then I went on my second deployment, got blown up, came back, went on my third deployment. So that's how that worked. But I see what the military is doing, making incremental changes, but those, in my opinion, aren't good enough. We had desegregated units in the Army in World War II. But when they came down the gangplank from World War II, it said colored soldiers one way, Black soldiers or white soldiers the other way. So again, the military is a microcosm of society. So we're going to have to deal with racism at a societal level because society feeds our military industrial complex. So we have to tackle it at all aspects and all levels. I don't want folks just to think that we can, somehow erase, the racisms in the military and everything will be fine. No, we have to tackle this at all levels and all angles. And that's what, we're trying to do at the Black Veterans Project, is to advance, research and knowledge on the racial disparities in the military and once you come out of uniform. So I'm glad that you're having me here. I'm glad that we're talking about the topic and discussion, because it's one that most of Americans who don't serve have no idea about. I'm glad we're seeing faces of the military that most folks don't think we exist, because military service has been co-opted by folks in this country to think that we all look like Pat Tillman. We're all just a square-jawed white guy from middle America, and I'm a Jamaican American kid from the hood who, my uniform is lit up like a damn Christmas tree because I served 3 tours in war. So
Oh my goodness, thank you so much for sharing, Isaiah. That's a very powerful story. So how would you say that your interactions and your experiences with racism has led you in your career post-military service?
they guide everything I do. First of all, like I told you, I walk around in my body. I am a 6'8" Black man. I am a huge human being. If you saw me on the streets, you would understand. You're like, that looks like a damn refrigerator with people clothes. I'm a big person. So I know as a Black man, I have to carry myself not only as a Black man, but as a large Black man with a beard and a booming voice. You know, that's the reason I wear my glasses all the time, because they disarm people. I don't need these to see. I need these to read like tiny words, but I wear them everywhere because my glasses literally disarm people. They're like, oh, that guy has on glasses and a sweater. He's not that, bad. Because if a white woman raises her voice, they ask her, ma'am, calm down. If I raise my voice, they call the police. And I know once the police are called, then it's an entirely different aspect, because there's the educated Isaiah you see right here, but I'm also the kid from the hood who's an infantryman. And I don't take anything from anybody. I don't care who you are. I've been shot at and blown up by people better than them. So you don't scare me. Whatever badge or gun or force or whatever you think you have, I promise you, I'm not scared of it. So, and I know myself. I'd rather be tried by 12 than carried by 6. And I know I will get out of hand. So I have to always keep myself in check and to understand that my Blackness is what they see first. They don't see the degrees. They don't see the national TV appearances. They don't see the congressional candidate for Congress who meets with lawmakers. They don't see my work with the Black Veterans Project or housing organizing. They don't see my military service. They don't see any of that. The first thing they see is my Blackness. And I understand that for a lot of people in this country, that is a very, very scary thing. So that's always at the forefront of my mind, because I can walk out of my house with all my accolades and still look like the suspect. I can still fit the description just walking to the bus stop and be hemmed up by a cop for no reason. So I'm fully aware of that every day of my life.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Isaiah. Please tell us how our watchers can get in touch with you at Black Veterans Project.
Just go to Black Veterans Project and email if you want to learn more about what we do and the work that we do and the policies and things that we're trying to advance, because they're critical to the health and wellness of our military and to the health and wellness of society in general. And you can go to Black Veterans Project and write us, and we'll write you back. As far as my personal stuff, just Isaiah James on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and you'll find me on those things, and you'll see about the work that I do and the topics that I talk about and things like that. It's just a normal everyday dude trying to make a difference.
Awesome. Well, I know you, as a Jamaican and an infantryman, it was very hard for you not to curse and keep it PG during this presentation.
It was.
So I appreciate that.
It was. I wanted to keep it PG. I didn't know who was listening, so I was like, let me not curse, because I used to curse all the time. But yes, it was really hard.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Isaiah, and we look forward to working with you even more in the future, and we'll be on the lookout for you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, moving along in our program, our next speaker, one of my favorite human beings in this whole wide world. We have had the opportunity to host quite a few events together, and she's just a very, very creative, lovely, wonderful spirit. So as one of the most connected and diverse artists on the scene, Simply T Poetry has built her career as one of the most fierce and competitive performers. Born LaTanya White, Simply T is an American poet and international performer raised in Virginia. Her pieces offer insight into Black feminism, the LGBTQ community, and combat veteran strife. She credits her time as a drill instructor to enhancing her talents of orating, writing, and consulting. Her transition out of the Army after 15 years of active duty service allowed her to become a business owner, create a syndicated talk show, and become an avid volunteer. She currently hosts the Shift Combo on iHeartRadio, is a council member of the National Small Business Association, and serves as a creative strategist for Minority Veterans of America. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Simply T Poetry.
What's going on, Crystal?
Hey T, I miss you, girl.
I miss you so much. You look gorgeous.
Thank you. So what are you sharing with us today? I'm super excited. I'm on the edge of my seat.
So I am going to share a poem that I wrote a couple of years, maybe a year and a half after I got out of the military. I was kind of forced to write the poem from one of my mentors. He was just like, I had one poem and then he didn't like it. He was like, so basically write it again. So I wrote it again. And basically it was just me explaining how I got discriminated against once I got in the military and what that felt like. So yeah, here we go. It's called Homeland. So I'm finally home. After 15 years of Army service, I didn't realize how much I missed it. That crisp Virginia air had me dressed to the nines, so I was rocking a scarf, blazer, and boots. My mother said ain't nothing new under the sun, and she's right. Because still ain't nothing to do in this boring town, and I gotta figure out a way to blow all this money before it burns a hole in my pocket. So I pulled up to the BMW dealership because I heard it stood for Big Money Works, and while my work be gigantic, I walked in, was greeted by four smug blue eyes, two white salesmen. I spoke, they didn't. I didn't care that much because I continued to browse for my next irrational transaction. I opened car doors, played with all the controls, cleared my throat loudly. No one ever offered assistance. Hell, they didn't even look up. But moments later, a Caucasian woman walks in. She is greeted with the same blue eyes, except this time they're smiling. She received a verbal introduction and full helping hands, and at this moment I paused. Seeing the attention given to this white lady over me had me scrambling for an emotion relevant to the situation. I was experiencing firsthand how my training as an Army recruit taught me to not allow my actions to dictate my actions, allowing droplets of cinnamon and sorrow to just roll off my back like I'm a rubber duck shotgun. But this level of confusion was reminiscent of a thrown dummy grenade. You see, everybody braces themselves for the impact except the person who pulled the pin. And it is still unclear from the dummy or the one who pulled the pin. Because I wanted to show him how disgusted I really was, draw my fist into a fireball, drop F-bombs like a fighter pilot, but this push and pull situation got me playing tug of war with myself in the mirror. Either way, I win. Either way, I lose. I wanted to justify their biased actions. I wanted to unlearn oppression. I wanted to convince myself that me putting my life on the line for these United States would stop me from being judged by the color of my skin. You see, the military gives you a false sense of reality, and reality really strikes. See, I raise my hand to defend a country who still sees me as 3/5 of a person, a country that rather see me in bondage than see me in a beamer. I am not immune to racism. I am just a decoy for it. After being enlisted for 15 years, serving in 4 separate combats, patrolling Iraqi streets, and being shot at, you would think that my complexion would read less like property, more like principle, but it doesn't. And when the salesman finally walks over, well, I could tell he didn't want to talk to me. He looked at me the same way you would look at a jungle gym inside of a cemetery. Like I was out of place. Like I didn't belong. Like I wasn't supposed to be here. It's funny how a distant land can feel more like home than the homeland I protect. Thank you.
Yes, I love it. I just, every time you speak and share one of your pieces, T, it really tugs at my heartstrings and pisses me off and makes me want to cry and laugh at all the same time. So thank
Yeah.
you so much for sharing. I think the piece that stood out the most to me was either way I win and either way I lose. And I
Right.
think that a lot of service members of color feel that way and feel that, even after service. So thank you so much for sharing. Please tell the people how they can get in touch with you and hear some more of your dope work.
Absolutely. So I am simply TEE Poetry. Everything that is on IG, that's on Facebook, that is .com. If you would like to get in touch with me, you can DM me on any of those places, platforms, Simply T Poetry at Gmail. I have my own podcast on iHeartRadio. It is called The Shift Convo. And I do, it stands for sharing helpful information for transition, allowing veterans to talk. We talk about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, whether they be veterans or anybody. But the biggest thing is just transitioning from one place in your life to another. So we're always big on that. So if you're interested or know somebody who is, please link up with me, get at me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, T. As usual, it is a pleasure.
All right, Chris.
Thanks, girl. All right, moving along to our last speaker of this evening, Christy Piper. She is a human dynamics, mindset, and relationship expert. In her military career, she was selected for the competitive position as oceanography officer in the Navy. However, while attending OCS, she became the target of bullies. First it was staff, then one of her classmates. Her and a few other female minorities became targets and were forced to repeat the most difficult part of the program multiple times. She repeated this difficult training for 6 months. This ended in injury and becoming separated for her and the other female minorities. She tried to report her situation through EO and IG. She soon faced more harassment. She learned the system is rigged to support the bullies and silence those who file reports. This keeps justice from being served. She's an advocate for changing this reporting system so that the bad apples can be rooted out and the military can become stronger for it. Outside of the military, she developed strategies to rise above her circumstances. Now she helps others uncover their own strength and resilience. She is the wise older sister and cool professor you always wanted. Chrissy received her undergraduate and graduate degrees from Florida State University and is a U.S. Navy veteran. She currently lives in New England. She currently wrote the #1 best-selling book, Girl, You Deserve More: How to Break His Spell Over You, Escape Your Toxic Partner, and Become Independent. She helps women who struggle with toxic relationships heal and find a great partner through her coaching program, Spin 180. Everyone, please welcome Christy. Christy, you there? You with us?
Hello. Yeah, I'm here. I
Hi.
think it won't let me start my own video though.
Uh-oh. Let's see. All right, well, while we get that figured out on our end, we'd love to hear your story in the meantime. Oh, there we go. Hi.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, so I got chosen, like I'd always known I'd wanted to join the military. It just wasn't the right time. Um, yeah, and I didn't know which branch, but I went to talk to like every branch except the Air Force. They had like this really long wait list and they have tons of people applying, and I just wanted to do it soon because I was getting older. I was actually in my 30s when I joined. Definitely not the typical career path. I had already been a professor, already had my degrees and everything. So, when I spoke to my recruiter, I was excited when she was like, you know what, oceanography would be perfect for you. They're trying to find more people with diverse backgrounds, and I happen to have my graduate degree in economics. And she's like, we need people in oceanography who think differently, who can bring their expertise to oceanography and just make it better. Like the Navy really needs people just like you. And so I was like, wow, okay, yeah, I hadn't thought of oceanography, but I'll apply to it. And turns out like it might be the most competitive position besides public affairs officer. And when I got there to OCS, people were like, oh my God, you got oceanography? Like, how did you do it? Like, some of them were really jealous too. They were like, you're going to have such an easy lifestyle. They kept saying easy lifestyle, which isn't the reason why I applied for it, but I'm like, okay, whatever. Um, so like I had come from teaching at a mostly women's college. And so like very, very, in New York City. So it was a very different environment than the military.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like getting yelled at in a mostly male dominated environment. I was like, oh my gosh. So like I attracted negative attention to myself the first day. I started crying. Okay, like I admit I made a mistake, like I cried, but I wasn't the only person who ever did that for sure. But it turns out like, so at OCS, what they do is you don't meet your class team yet until like, I think it's the 4th or 5th day of training. And so the Candios, which is like the people about to graduate, they train you. But my whole class team already knew my name and my name alone just because of probably the crying, and well, definitely the crying incident. But another thing is like there was one other Asian girl in my class, but she was prior enlisted. And yeah, so they actually confused her for me because they just said, oh, the Asian girl. Okay.
Mhm.
And so they started just yelling at her for no reason, like Piper, Piper, like just screaming at her. But like they figured out like, oh, oops, that Asian one's not Piper. And so like she even told me this later. She's like, they were like screaming your name at me. So did you like do something? I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, you're already a target. Like I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just standing there. They were screaming your name at me. So just be careful. And they shave, they shave the guy's head when they come in. And, especially if you're just a white guy, they all look the exact same. They all look identical. So like those guys, like they screwed up just as much as the women or the minorities, but they blended right in. They never learned their names. But if you stick out, if you're a different color, you're a woman, you look different, they know exactly who you are and you're never going to blend in with anybody. And that's something I never even thought of. Like, I mean, in civilian life, sure, like people are going to look at you different when you look different than the majority. Like that's just a fact of life. And, you kind of get used to it. But like, I just wasn't ready for this. I was not ready. And so, yeah, needless to say, like I was a target. I was forced to repeat the program several times, like several evolutions, and it's very subjective. Like the way they grade people, like they can almost make up just like anything, like, oh yeah, you weren't pushing hard enough. And you really can't say anything. Like you definitely can't argue, it just makes it worse. And so like they did this to me, and then there were some other female minorities in other classes too. And basically what happens is like they just fail you so many times, and they come up with other reasons. They'll say like, oh yeah, you had no integrity, we're gonna write you up, or you had no accountability. They'll like make up a charge and then say like, you had no accountability because you won't admit this false thing that we're accusing you of, so we're gonna write you up, and oh, by the way, you're gonna have to start the whole program from day one even though you're almost graduated.
Oh my gosh.
Unbelievable. Yeah, like if somebody was telling me this now, like, and I hadn't been through it, I probably wouldn't even believe them. And I have some veteran, or a lot of veteran friends actually, and they're just like, are you sure you didn't do anything wrong? Like I'm pretty sure you're just not meant for the military, like you just screwed up. But no, like it's just really hard to admit. And then I have friends who are also just like trying to defend the Navy. They're like, you're making the Navy look bad by talking like that. Don't talk like that. And it's like they get mad at me, and I'm like, no, I'm just telling you what happened. Like, and it's not the Navy in and of itself, it's this specific command. Like, yes, the military and the systems and the reporting systems are really rigged, and the whole system of like reporting just to the next level higher than you, like that is so flawed, because if they're the ones abusing you, you have nobody to turn to.
Right.
And so what ended up happening is like I ended up just getting hurt. I was barely even able to walk. I was just taking like painkillers just to get through the training, like prescription painkillers. They'll prescribe them in medical. And so like I was just trying to get through, but I ended up getting hurt. And long story short, I tried to, and it wasn't just me, it was there were two other female minorities like in classes near mine that it happened to as well. And no white guys, no men. It didn't happen to the men. It didn't happen to white females, even though I do think that the white females and the minority males were also picked on, but not to the extent of like the female minorities. Like we were on the bottom of the totem pole for sure.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the ones who were like Asian and then like mixed. There was another girl that was like mixed race, part Black and part Hispanic. And I almost think like they, gosh, I don't even know if I should say this is like so inappropriate, but I almost feel like it's not like, these guys go overseas to these other countries when they're just deployed or on a mission, and they end up dating these women in other countries. And I kind of almost feel like, or sleeping with the prostitutes or something. And I almost feel like the way we look kind of reminded them of like somebody that's an other, like, oh yeah, we can just treat them like they don't belong, they don't deserve to be an officer. Like that's really strongly a feeling that I got. Like they didn't see our strength or see us as equals or as people. And I know like they treat everyone like total crap in the military, in boot camp, like I get it, but this was like people were literally reporting things that like other white candidates did that were really really screwed up, but they would be like fishing, like, oh well, what did Piper do? Did she do anything? And then if it was like something that wasn't even like a tenth as bad, they'd be like, no, tell us more about Piper. What did Piper do? And then they would just be creating like documentation for certain people, certain minorities, to write them up to try to get them kicked out of the program.
Yeah.
And well, really, they would just try to write you up enough times and harass you enough so you'd leave on your own. But if that didn't work, they would try either trying to get you injured or to kick you out. And you know, most of these women, like to this day, they won't even speak about it. Like I messaged one of them like, hey, I'm going on this you know, I still keep in touch with some of them, and I'm like, hey, I'm going on this talk like tomorrow. I texted her yesterday and I said like, just trying to start a conversation about it, but she really doesn't like to talk about it. She'll say like, I want to, you know, I don't even want to say I was in the Navy. Like it was just a whole embarrassing episode in my life and I don't even want to speak about it. So somebody like, and that's the point that they try to get you to, so you don't speak out. They try to silence you with shame, so you don't speak out, and that shame keeps us silent. And if we don't have a voice, nobody's going to know, and they're going to keep getting away with it. And that's just unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable.
Totally agree, Christina. Thank you so much for sharing. Sorry, for the sake of time, we just really have to keep the program moving, but I totally agree with what you said, that you speaking out and finding others to speak out against these injustices are the only way that we're going to get attention to them and actually have any real change. So thank you again so much for sharing. Please let everyone know how they can purchase your book and get in touch with you.
Yeah, so it's on Amazon, and the best way to get in touch with me and find out more about the coaching program or anything else is my website, which is christypiper.com, and that's CHRISTYPIPER.com. And I've effectively used my so there is a happy ending to the story. Like I still like love and I don't have any regrets. Like I took away all my experiences and it just made me so much stronger. I mean, imagine how many times I went through boot camp, and I use that same strength within myself to, you know, help people realize, especially women. I specialize in helping women. Like, even if you had a tough background, if you've had toxic relationships in your past, including past partners, or even like this workplace bullying in the military or other places, there's hope to change, and you can completely change. Just get up, and you can just change all your relationships and your role in life.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for those words, Christina. Hopefully a lot of people got a little bit of hope and a way to move forward from your remarks. So we really appreciate it. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Crystal.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, our last portion of the evening, we are going to be airing a clip from American Veteran, which is part of PBS's series. So the first portion of the clip features the 6888th Central Postal Directory Battalion, more commonly known as the 6888. This all-female African-American unit was integral in ensuring tons of mail was routed to soldiers serving in World War II, giving them one of the most valuable weapons that a soldier could have: hope. The second portion features an interview with one of the surviving Tuskegee Airmen, the very first African-American military aviation unit in the armed forces. Let's take a look.
We went to Birmingham, in England. We were the 6888th Postal Battalion. It was my first time going overseas. You know, I was an adventurous person. They said there was a backlog of mail, but to see it, I mean, they had mail piling up for 2 to 3 years. Our motto was, no mail, low morale. We were an all-black unit. At that time, you know, you had black units, you had white. I remember going to a party given by some of the English girls, and this soldier, an American soldier, was so livid. He was livid when he saw that I was there, and he came over to me and said, "What the hell are you doing over here, nigger?" And that was the first time, you know, I didn't know what to say. I didn't say anything. I said, no, I just slowly walked away.
Women were categorically excluded from certain positions in the military, and African Americans were as well. And when you look at the 6888, what makes it unique and a very interesting unit is that you see the intersection of race and gender, with women serving overseas for the first time.
We were given 6 months. We got it done in 3, half the time. We were able to get all that mail sorted and sent out. And then when we left Birmingham, we found a similar situation in France. No wonder they needed so many of us.
My father was a World War II era veteran, and I looked up to his generation. But the popular history of that war tended to overlook some harsh realities. Black service members were strictly segregated and usually given the worst jobs the military could dole out: digging ditches, draining swamps, and burying the dead. Decades of activism finally opened the door for a group of fighter pilots known as the Tuskegee Airmen.
From the time that program started in 1941, it ended in June of 1946. We trained 992 pilots. We were stationed in Italy. And our 30th mission was a special mission. Every airplane we could get in the air took off early in the morning, and we caught them by surprise. So here I am, about 100 miles from Linz, Austria, going in on this locomotive. And I got that locomotive lit up like a Christmas tree. And I got close and I said, why doesn't that thing blow up? Why doesn't it blow up? That's when it explodes. I'm caught in the explosion and my engine was damaged. I knew that I had it. So I pulled the airplane up, rolled it over, I jettisoned my canopy, and you pop the stick forward and it throws you out. I land in a small wooded area. A few minutes later, there were a couple of guys up on the top of the hill and pulled rifles out. They saw me down there. So I threw my hands up, and that was it. Now, I'm 20 years old, and the first time I was integrated was in a POW camp. That's a sorry commentary, but that was the truth. After the war was over, Truman decided he was going to integrate the military. So on the base, we were integrated. But off the base with my family, we were in a segregated society.
All right, it was an amazing clip. Hopefully everyone enjoyed and had really good audio and video. I know I did. All right. If you enjoyed tonight's program, don't forget to register for Minority Vets Equity, Inclusion, and Justice Summit, where we will have panels speaking on topics ranging from race bias in the case of reparations to issues facing Indigenous veterans. The summit is November 13th and 14th, and you can register online at mvasummit21.vfairs.com. And please make sure you follow Minority Vets for updates on social media, and we're at Minority Vets on everything. Thank you so much for everyone for tuning in tonight and bearing witness to our collective truth. Thank you for helping us feel seen, heard, and supported by those we love. Please join me in thanking our speakers, our panelists, and all those who are currently or are putting up the uniform of the U.S. Armed Services. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.